Incredible twist, Millionaire discovers little girl's heartbreaking plight after father's funeral. Ethan Reynolds stood outside the chapel, his designer suit feeling heavier than the weight of the world resting on his shoulders. The quaint streets of Willow Creek had offered him nothing but a flood of painful memories, and the loss of a father he barely knew somehow deepened the despair. The funeral service was a blur, muffled prayers and distant sobs coalesced into a deafening silence. Yet, nothing could prepare him for what he would discover next. As he stepped inside the chapel, his heart raced. A news report he skimmed on his phone just before entering had shaken him. A 6-year-old girl, orphaned after her father died tragically in an accident, faced imminent eviction from the only home she knew. The little girl's name felt hauntingly familiar. Mia saw visions of innocence in the flickering candlelight as he took his seat. That housing, he soon learned, was part of his inheritance. The very air thickened with dread. What was he supposed to do? Wealth weighed down on him like chains forged from privilege. Ethan's instincts screamed at him to retreat back to his life of luxury in the city, a place where problems could be solved with a quick payment. Yet here, in his childhood town, each stare from the attendees pinpointed his struggle with the moral crossroad laid before him. Flashes of Mia's face mingled with thoughts of his father, stitching together an unsettling narrative of responsibility and regret. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Each breath felt like a challenge as Ethan navigated through the assembly of mourners, their expressions a mix of sorrow and distrust. Words of sympathy seemed foreign. He was a stranger here, a millionaire with little warmth to offer. As the stories of his father echoed softly around him, he felt resentment rising, resentment for never having truly known the man, and for the weighty legacy now thrust upon him. The notion of losing Mia, a child yet untouched by the cruelties of life, roused an unexpected guardian instinct within him. The familiar notion of duty clashed violently with a deep-rooted fear of staying. Could he be a father figure when he harbored his own childhood scars? Would he be the merciless wealthy outsider that everyone seemed to expect? Pressure mounted as he lingered longer in conversations, trying to connect with those who lost his father. Yet, every measured word plummeted under the weight of a judgmental gaze, each question being not just about his wealth but about his worthiness. Finally, standing before the casket, he felt the walls closing in. An avalanche of anger and pain clawed at his insides. Who did he want to be? Could he fight for Mia and endeavor to change a town that viewed him as an intruder? The moment churned tightly in his chest, his resolve trembling against the unresolved anguish of his father's choices. With his inheritance now a burden, the terrifying truth loomed. The life he thought he'd return to had faded, and in its place was the haunting question, who was Ethan Reynolds destined to become? Ethan stepped away from the casket, his surroundings gradually morphing from a haze of sorrow into a shrill clarity. Every corner of the chapel echoed his father's life and choices, yet the most pressing echo was that of Mia's plight, reverberating through the very fabric of his existence. He hesitated on the threshold, the decision gnawing at him like a persistent itch that refused to be ignored. He had inherited not just property, but the moral obligation to act. The crisp bills and investments accumulated over a lifetime felt unrelated to this weight. Money could only salve wounds, not heal them. His thoughts spiraled: would he sell that house, pocket the profit, and absolve himself of responsibility? An image of Mia's hopeful eyes floated in his mind, and he wrestled with the idea like a beast caught in a trap. Ethan's discomfort bubbled to the surface in the form of determination. Rejecting the idea of a fleeting escape, he tucked away his phone and clutched the inheritance documents like a shield. His father had faced demons of his own. Ethan realized he owed it to Mia, and to himself, to confront his family's legacy head-on. Leaving the chapel, he saw the familiar streets of Willow Creek wrapped beneath an unforgiving twilight. Each turn he took felt like a transition away from his past, yet each street whispered the stories of his youth, the baseball games he played, the friends he left behind, and the missed opportunities for connection. Suddenly, he was faced with a decision that extended beyond Mia's turmoil. It was about his own rediscovery of purpose. Guided by instinct, Ethan made his way to a small community center on the edge of town. The building had seen better days, and today it reflected his own tumultuous state, a place with potential buried under years of neglect. He recalled seeing signs for a charity meeting dedicated to helping local families facing housing crises. Allowing his feet to lead him, he pushed through the door, stepping into a room filled with concerned faces and muffled discussions. The sight disarmed him. The families gathered there were a microcosm of all the struggles and resilience veiled by the glossy veneer of his former life. He took a seat at the back, folding his hands tight. As discussions continued about aid and funding, he felt a swelling belief his fortune, an albatross of guilt until now, could serve as a foundation for action. When the group broke for refreshments, he caught the eye of the facilitator, a determined woman with a quick smile. Her name was Kelly, and she struck him as a beacon of hope. "You look troubled," she remarked, pouring herself coffee. "You're not from around here, are you?" "No. Just visiting," he managed, summoning an uneasy smile. Kelly studied him with open curiosity. "Visiting can show you a town's heart. Sometimes you find what you never wanted." Her words charged the air with unanswered questions. What exactly did he want? And in his solitude, had he been ignoring the very life around him, letting the opportunities slip through his fingers? As they spoke, an idea ignited within him, a project connecting his resources to their needs could bridge his isolation to a community in need. But every ounce of initiative he felt constrictively slammed against the reality of the self-doubt that loomed large. Could he truly transform the essence of his inheritance into something meaningful? A voice inside questioned, but he resolved to test the waters anyway. As the meeting adjourned, he stepped outside and was gripped by a profound uncertainty. However, the hope ignited by his conversation with Kelly lingered like a warm glow in his chest. He had choices before him, both frightening and thrilling. Yet, he couldn't shake the awareness of Mia's looming eviction. What if he could harness the passion of this community meeting to ensure that no child, especially not Mia, would ever face such a fate again? Ethan glanced back at the community center, a new resolve swimming through his veins. It was time to stake his claim, not just on an inheritance, but on his destiny. The moment of decision was upon him. Would he just be Ethan Reynolds, the rich outsider, or would he evolve into something more significant? He turned back toward the center as his phone buzzed with a news alert, revealing startling information about Mia. He hesitated, bracing himself for the reality of what lay ahead. The time had come to face the consequences of his choice. Ethan stood outside the community center, his heart pounding against the weight of the news alert that blared from his phone. The message was as sharp as a dagger. Mia was not only facing eviction but had already been served notice. Panic coursed through him, threatening to drown out the hope he had felt just moments ago. Why hadn't he acted sooner? The thought gnawed at him, a bitter reminder of his previous inaction, encircled by the escape route he proposed for himself. He forced himself to breathe. Making decisions out of fear would only lead to more regret. He recalled Kelly's words, that visiting can reveal hidden truths. In this moment, it seemed clear that the truth was both simple and terrifying. He needed to act. His mind whirled with plans, ideas filching for attention like the clock eyes of each trembling second. Should he call Mia's parents? No, they were likely too overwhelmed. They needed help, not more problems. Instead, he could reach out to Kelly. She was grounded and knowledgeable about the community's needs. But first, he had to dismantle the fear tethering his ambition. With a deliberate stride, he turned back toward that unassuming building, each step heavy with intention. What if he focused not on putting out fires but on building something sustainable? His inheritance could be more than just wealth, it could be the seed for something transformative. The urgency of Mia's condition fused with clear purpose. He could create a fund, something that directly assisted families from eviction by providing transitional housing. Ethan pushed through the door again, seeking the warmth of hope amid the cold realities gnawing at the edges of his mind. Kelly smiled at him, a woman who seemed to thrive on the momentum of helping others. "You came back," she noted, leaning against the table, hands poised and ready for conversation. "I have an idea," he declared, urgency spilling over. "A fund, something to offer support to families at risk of eviction. A way to create safe housing for kids, like Mia, who deserve stability." Her surprise morphed into excitement. "That's a powerful notion. Funding is always a challenge, but we can explore options and partnerships. What's your experience in this area?" Ethan hesitated, feeling the weight of his previous life as an investor. "I've handled funds before, but never for something like this. Just venture capital and investments." A flicker of doubt rippled through him, but he forcefully pushed it aside. "But I've realized I can no longer see financial allocations as merely profits. I know now they can shape futures." Kelly's expression shifted, reflecting encouragement. "That's how it starts. Belief in a different outcome creates pathways for action. You have the resources, and with guidance, we can make it relevant to the community." Her confidence felt infectious, though internally Ethan wrestled with uncertainties. He struggled with the mentality of investor savior. Was he really prepared to step into this role and impact lives beyond dollar amounts? He felt like an imposter in this realm, as if any prior expertise were distant echoes from a world that no longer resonated with him. But the glint of challenge in Kelly's eyes compelled him forward. He could not just stand at the edge, hesitating while Mia's home hung in jeopardy. Each story shared in that room reflected pain and struggle, resonating with his core. As they mapped out potential strategies, partnering with local nonprofits, fundraising outreach, and advocating for programs, Ethan felt an unfamiliar spark igniting within him. His heart raced, not from fear but from the thrill of purpose. Though he was still on unsteady ground, he realized he was discovering what he was capable of. But with that realization came another thought, unsettling yet exhilarating: what if this was merely the beginning? Beneath every action lay complex layers of implications and ramifications. Would his involvement truly address the systemic failures that left families like Mia's vulnerable? And if failure rose up, what would that mean for him? As excitement sharpened into focus, Ethan was gripped by the realization that stepping into this role also meant accepting the weight of vulnerability, risking personal failure for the chance to affect change. He was about to find his answers when his phone buzzed loudly, displaying another alert. The complexity of what lay ahead came crashing down like thunder. Wiping his hands on his pants, he gathered courage and opened to read the message, bracing himself for whatever was to come. The real challenge had just begun, and the stakes were higher than he envisioned. What if this next step could change everything? Would he cling to his inherited privilege or let it empower him to shape a meaningful existence? The pulse of Ethan's heart quickened as he read the new alert: family of young girl faces immediate eviction, community rally needed. The words blurred for a moment as his mind raced, colliding thoughts of Mia, his own pressing responsibilities, and the fear of inadequacy. He cast a quick glance at Kelly, whose face reflected genuine concern and the very drive that had ignited his own resolve. "What is it?" she asked, a knowing edge in her voice. "Mia isn't the only one," he muttered, unfolding the message to show her the details. Kelly leaned closer, reading intently. "So, there's another family we can help. This is just reaffirming your idea." Ethan felt a mixture of dread and excitement surge within him. Twice now, families were on the brink of losing their homes. But how far could he extend himself? He had barely scratched the surface of understanding the stakes involved. "Do we have the capacity?" he asked quietly, scanning the room filled with posters and photos telling stories of struggle and resilience. "How do we expand this idea from concept to reality?" Kelly took a deep breath, her expression shifting into one of determination. "We start small. Let us not overwhelm ourselves. Build relationships with the families, understand their needs firsthand. We can organize meetings with them, work out budgets, and figure out how to streamline these processes. Ethan nodded slowly, her suggestions resonating simple yet powerful. He had always thrived in the world of numbers, but this was different. This was raw and unfiltered connection. He felt time constricting around him, ticking away opportunities and hopes. What if we set a clear timeline? He proposed, urgency flipping through him. We can aim to have a fundraising event next month. A way to introduce our initiative, connect with potential donors, and generate awareness. Yes. That could work, Kelly replied, her enthusiasm infectious. You'll need to tell your story. Your connection to this cause is key. People are invested in the personal narratives behind a mission. Ethan's stomach twisted as he considered sharing his journey. His past felt distant, but now it shadowed him like a specter. Could he open up about his previous life as a cold investor to evoke empathy? Would the truth of his transition resonate with people, or would they stay mired in preconceived judgments? Can I even portray that accurately? He questioned, doubt creeping back in. I'm still learning what it means to really give back. Remember, it's about honesty, Kelly told him, her eyes steady and sincere. People relate to struggle. There's courage in a fresh start, and vulnerability can break down walls. He chewed on her words, their significance resonating deeply. If vulnerability was a bridge, then perhaps he could allow himself to walk across it, step into the space where he could connect with others, share their hardships, and rewrite the narrative together. With a renewed sense of purpose, Ethan pulled out his phone and began drafting a message to Mia's family, inviting them to speak at the upcoming fundraiser. This was his chance to bridge the gap between personal privilege and community impact, a defining juncture that could solidify his role in this initiative. As he clicked send, exhilaration surged through him. The thought of unraveling his life and exposing it to the world so that others might find hope was daunting. Yet, the echo of potential began to drown out fear, charging him forward. Let us set a date for that meeting. Today, he said, channeling his newfound urgency into logistics. We can build our plan to ensure those at risk have a voice. What about tomorrow night? Kelly's smile widened. That's a perfect start. We will gather. But as she spoke, Ethan's mind spiraled elsewhere. What if they faced backlash? What if they met stubborn resistance? A tide of uncertainty washed over him once more. Was he truly ready to face the challenges that lay ahead, not just for others but for himself? The weight of past decisions loomed larger now. This journey had reshaped him, but little did he know, the real confrontation was yet to come. As he stood up to leave, a singular thought emerged. What if the very act of helping others unearthed deeper truths about his own character that he wasn't prepared to confront? That evening, Ethan realized that every step he took forward was also a step closer to unearthing the shadows of his own inadequacies. The path ahead was fraught with challenges, but the true test would come when they faced the resistance of those who were determined to maintain the status quo. What would he do when confronted by people who might undermine their efforts? The moment for that challenge felt imminent, and the stakes were exponentially higher than he could have ever anticipated. Ethan sat in the dim light of his office, the faint hum of his computer screen illuminating the room. Each keystroke felt weighted, a reminder of what lay ahead. The email he had just sent still buzzed in his brain, but now there was a pressing silence punctuated only by the pensive ticking of the clock. He fought against the creeping sensation of dread, grappling with thoughts that fluttered like chaotic fireflies. What had he set in motion? Every scenario played out in his mind: families showing up, their eyes filled with despair, potential donors who might treat his mission as a mere charity project, the community that could very well reject him. The deeper he sunk into these thoughts, the more he realized that opening up emotionally would place him at the mercy of their judgments and motivations. He leaned back in his chair, squeezing the bridge of his nose in frustration. Wasn't he that part of what he was trying to escape? The sharp glare of judgment that had followed him all his life as an investor. This wasn't just about money, after all it was about lives, stories, and the palpable struggle those families faced. And yet, his own struggles felt like a drag on his progress. What comfort could he offer when he himself felt so inadequately fortified? He took a deep breath and reached for a notebook he had tucked under some clutter on his desk. As he flipped through the pages, he landed on a quote he had written several weeks ago: "Transform pain into purpose." It struck a chord then, but now it felt like a challenge he was on the verge of abandoning. How could he transform anything tangible from pain when his own scars remained raw? Yet the dissonance within him only fueled a growing conviction. He had confronted failures in his past, but each one had served as an opportunity for growth. Maybe this was simply another leg in the journey, a deeper plunge into understanding the human condition, not as a detached observer but as an active participant. With this thought taking root, he pushed away from his desk and stood. He had been talking a big game all afternoon about meeting families and listening to their stories, but stories required a storyteller to listen in good faith. He needed to empower them by wielding his platform effectively, not by dancing around his vulnerability. Determination flooded his veins. He needed to confront not only his fears but also navigate the bitterness lurking in his heart. He grabbed his phone, scrolling through contacts until he landed on Claire's name, a longtime friend who worked in nonprofit management. He had often relied on her during those initial awkward forays into philanthropy, but he had also hesitated more than once to reach out. As the dial tone rang in his ear, the faint buzz in his stomach sharpened into an edge of resolve. When she answered, he poured out his intentions, the seriousness of the challenge ahead, and, begrudgingly, his own fears about facing resistance. "I feel like I'm standing on the brink of something that could either float or sink," he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "Are you ready to embrace what happens next?" Claire asked, her tone steady and grounded. Idealism is risky, but it can also be profoundly transformative. If you don't let your own experiences shape the narrative, how do you expect anyone else to follow? With each word she spoke, Ethan felt a light flicker within him. There it was, that promise of possibility against the chaos. It dawned on him that vulnerability wasn't just a harsh mirror to face, it was a canvas waiting for his brushstrokes, an invitation for others to partake in the artistic process of their lives. They strategized, outlining steps that first included understanding the current housing crisis and then sculpting the narrative he would convey. He took careful notes, channeling this energy into actionable plans, wanting to lay down the groundwork before he took on the emotional load. As they wrapped up, Claire's final words lingered. "You'll face opposition, Ethan. But the moment you step out of the shadows is when you'll discover who you truly are beyond the titles and expectations." He hung up, invigorated yet anxious. He realized that the real challenge wasn't merely the logistics of the upcoming meeting or the sensitivity required in interacting with struggling families. The challenge lay in the confrontation with himself and how much he was willing to reveal amidst chaos. What would he do when the line between helping and exposing his own vulnerabilities began to blur? The moment of confrontation felt unyielding, like standing before an unwritten chapter, ready to unfold. Ethan awakened the next morning with a brittle resolve. Dreams from the night had woven remnants of hope and doubt. The uncertainties still prickled at the back of his mind, untamed and haunting, yet he could almost hear Claire's steady voice reverberating against them. Today was crucial, a day he felt was set upon a precipice, teetering between his aspirations and the messiness of real-life struggles. He showered, allowing the warm water to rush over him like a cleansing stream. As he dressed, he noticed his reflection in the mirror, but instead of the typical self-critique, he found a flicker of purpose lighting his eyes. He squared his shoulders, adjusting a tie that felt slightly out of place. He felt ill-prepared, but perhaps that discomfort was a necessary part of change. The meeting space was in a modest community center, its walls sporting an array of photographs that captured moments of warmth amidst life's shadows. As he approached the entrance, he caught sight of small clusters of families gathering, mothers cradling children and fathers holding hands with their partners. Glimpses of resilience and love seeped through their worried expressions, evoking both empathy and urgency in him. With each step, a knot unfurled in his stomach. The impulse to retreat crept and the desire to revert to safety felt nearly overwhelming. But as he stepped inside, he steeled himself with the realization that this wasn't he about him. This was an opportunity to connect, to listen, and perhaps, to lead through shared human experience. The idea settled deep like a steady drumbeat. He moved through the crowd, offering smiles and gentle nods to foster familiarity. Until now, he'd viewed vulnerability as a liability, a crack in his armor that might lead to exposure. What if, instead, it was the very connection he longed for? One he could nurture, cultivating a garden of trust instead of yearning for the control that often eluded him. The panel discussion began, and as the speaker delved into the nuances of the housing crisis, Ethan felt a swirl of conflicting emotions. Passionate stories were shared, tragedies unveiled with dignified composure, the parents, the children, their voices raw yet strikingly articulate. Each narrative peeled back a layer of his emotional armor, revealing deeper parts of himself he hadn't acknowledged. He listened with intention, forcing his walls down each time a particularly wrenching tale unfolded. When it was his turn to speak, Ethan cleared his throat, eyes scanning the audience who bore the weight of their experiences, and he felt that same weight pressing on his own heart. I stand here before you not just as a financier but as a human who hasn't always understood the full breadth of hardship. He hesitated but pressed on. I've struggled with the idea of how to help, torn between judgment and empathy. The openness in his voice was palpable, a subtle shift, exposing an authentic vulnerability. I want to learn from you. I want to understand how I can use my resources to amplify your voices, rather than drown them out with intention masked as action. The room fell into a dense silence, the kind that invites reflection. It was both terrifying and liberating to have shared such a piece of himself, yet the moment grew thick with anticipation. Would they receive him? Would his words, fraught with uncertainties, resonate? Their gazes were scrutinizing yet softened by a hint of acceptance. Heavy shoulders relaxed slightly, and he could sense their tensions dissolving. Soon, a hand shot up from a woman in the back, her voice breaking through the silent tension. We want someone to help us, but we need more than just promises. We need someone who will fight for us, not just today but in the ongoing struggle. As her words echoed, he felt a call to arms present in her plea, willingness to engage in discomfort for the sake of growth. It ignited something fierce within him, amplifying the resolve to not only face his fears but also to adjust the lens through which he viewed connection. Sweat trickled down his spine as he realized this was no longer about him. It was a chance to create something profound. He nodded. I am ready to fight, but I need your stories as compass points. In every heart-wrenching truth you share, I can find purpose. In the chaos of those moments, he discovered a newfound clarity, a tentative understanding that this path might be riddled with conflict, yet it also unfurled enormous potential for communal transformation. But as the words poured from him, he fretted about the responsibilities hidden behind their reciprocity. This was a double-edged sword. This was the birth of a relationship, but how much of himself would he ultimately have to sacrifice for it? The conversation spiraled after his statement, igniting a fervor of dialogue. Ethan was caught in a whirlwind of perspectives, enthusiasm intertwining with his nagging doubts. What would happen on this journey of collective healing? Would he piece the fragments back together in a way that honored their stories and his own? He stood at the edge of this newfound influence, peering into the uncharted waters ahead, teetering on the brink of deep commitment or perhaps deep trouble. Ethan emerged from the panel discussion with a heart racing from the intensity of the experience. The laughter and tears shared in that room created an intricate web of connection. Yet, as he walked to his car, the hum of voices still echoed in his mind. The meeting had ignited a fire within him, but it also cast shadows that loomed larger than before. The woman's plea reverberated in his thoughts. What kind of fight was he truly ready to engage in? Sitting behind the steering wheel, he was struck by a sudden clarity. This wasn't merely a matter of speaking at gatherings or offering monetary support. This was about transforming the way he perceived his role in these lives. A momentary flicker of doubt reminded him of the control he had wielded in his past navigating through financial spreadsheets and business ventures that often left him cold. Now, faced with real human suffering, those skills felt like archaic tools on a foreign terrain. But perhaps what he needed was to turn that knowledge into a bridge instead of a barrier. Could he channel his experience into something tangible? Each calculation he had mastered, each risk he had taken, what if they could serve the narrative of those families? He yearned for the ability to merge his business acumen with genuine compassion, yet the fear of misstepping clawed at him. Failure once had a familiar face, it was a haunting reminder of misjudgments and losses. He drove home, weaving through the streets that now felt less familiar, each turn echoing potential avenues he could explore to foster change. The ideas began to crystallize in his mind, but with clarity came an increasing sense of urgency. Pressure built within him, prodding at the frayed edges of his confidence. If he was to commit, he needed a plan, something not formulated out of a desire for control but driven by understanding, generosity, and humility. Arriving at his apartment, he paused outside, the weight of his resolve settling in. Could he step into this intimidating new role? Flowing with the surge of inspiration, Ethan began scribbling down actionable ideas, simple initiatives that would empower stories rather than overshadow them. He listed avenues such as mentorship programs, fundraising campaigns, and spaces where families could share their narratives across the digital plane. At times, memories of his past cardio kept creeping in, the boardrooms, the sterile angles of the executive world who cared for profits above lives. He was terrified by the prospect of falling into those old patterns. No, he whispered to himself, this is different. And yet the uncertainty lingered. What if he miscalculated the impact, or, more painful, what if his presence inadvertently opened wounds? Hours passed, and the late-night silence filled his apartment with ghostly echoes. He moved aimlessly from paper to computer, for every plan drafted bore parentheses filled with what-ifs. Each moment of potential success was shadowed by the specter of anticipated failure. Yet at the core of everything, he discovered a budding resilience. He realized he wasn't just creating strategies, he was breaking down barriers within himself. He craved feedback. Voices that could challenge his outlook. As he hesitated, the fear of vulnerability resurfaced. If he exposed these fledgling ideas, risking rejection and critique, would that prove he was merely a visionary lost in idealism? Or could it signify a stepping stone towards genuine engagement? Knocking on the door of discomfort, Ethan decided to select a few of the mothers he had spoken to earlier. They were authentic, grounded, having faced countless upheavals that had shaped their lives. Surely, they could provide guidance on ways to channel his intentions into effective action. He sent them messages, bypassing the self-doubt, seeking allies rather than followers. As he set his phone down, a question seized hold of him. Could he find the courage to reveal the depths of his insecurities, not as a battle cry for redemption, but as a genuine testament to the journey of rediscovery he was embarking on? He breathed deeply, mentally preparing for the responses that would come. This was no longer simply about steps forward, it was about facing the tangled complexities of human relationships and the palpable fear of failing those who looked to him for strength. In that moment, he felt himself teetering on the brink of a new threshold. He didn't know if this would lead to triumph or disaster, but the urge to plunge into the unknown fueled him, a preparatory step into the authentic depths of change he sought. But every door he opened only seemed to reveal new questions. Would he be able to follow through, or would his commitment dissolve in the face of harsh realities? As he sank into the solitude of the night, a deep-rooted urgency nagged within him, a gnawing sensation that change was necessary but fraught with risks he could not foresee. The path forward remained uncertain, and the shadows of his past seemed to whisper provocations he had yet to confront. Tomorrow would bring clarity, possibly even fear. But there was no turning back now. He had embarked on a road where every decision could shape the lives around him, not just his own. What awaited him on this uncharted path could either be a revelation or a devastating reckoning. Ethan woke up to the silent hum of the city outside his apartment window, the sun barely kissing the horizon. The weight of the previous night carved deeper lines into his resolve. Today was not just any day, it was the beginning of an uncharted venture, a plunge into emotional turbulence that could expose the rawness of human experience. In his chest, the fire from the panel discussion reignited, but it flickered against an ever-present shadow of doubt. He brewed coffee, the rich aroma swirling around him, grounding him momentarily in some semblance of routine. Yet as he sat at the kitchen table, his fingers anxiously drumming against the wooden surface, it felt like every heartbeat echoed the question of whether he could influence genuine change. His phone buzzed, shaking him out of the spiraling thoughts. The mothers he had reached out to had responded. Each message was a small sliver of hope wrapped in their encouragement, but also a reminder of the realities they faced. They were counting on him, and the burden of their trust pressed down heavily. Responding was no longer about ideas or plans, it was about becoming a steady presence in their lives. Meeting? Yes, let us meet, he typed nervously. After hastily dressing, Ethan made his way to the cafe where he agreed to meet them. The streets were bustling, a stark contrast to the overwhelming introspection swirling in his mind. He couldn't shake the vivid imagery of their struggles from the night before, lives marked by pain that he had once only discussed in boardrooms as statistical risks. As he approached the cafe, he spotted two familiar faces amidst the scattered tables. Sarah, a single mother with a fierce spirit, and Mia, her younger sister who had clung to her side during their previous conversations, both looked up with a mixture of curiosity and hope. "Thanks for coming," Ethan managed, his voice wavering slightly. The conversation began tentatively, the three of them navigating the intricate landscape of expectations and fears. They shared stories filled with raw emotion. Sarah talked about perpetual worry over bills after recently losing her husband, while Mia hesitated before speaking about her aspirations, overshadowed by the day-to-day grind of survival. Their honesty unraveled the layers Ethan had hesitated to touch. For every sympathetic look he offered, he felt his own vulnerabilities surfacing. The contrast between their stark realities and his previous life, a life devoid of such visceral engagement, struck him hard. "How can you help us?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. It was a question he had anticipated but wasn't fully ready to answer. "I want to create a space where your stories matter," he stated, surprised by the clarity that had suddenly surfaced. "Mentorship programs, community gatherings. Empowerment. I want to support you as you support each other. It needs to come from you. Your input will shape this." He watched as their gazes shifted. Was there skepticism? Hope? The moment stretched, the silence punctuated only by the rattling of cups and quiet murmurs around them. Ethan felt the pressure turn inward. He anticipated outright rejection, skepticism, or worse, indifference to his plans. Finally, Sarah spoke again. "It's ambitious, Ethan. But it depends on if you can really connect. We've had so many promises that have fallen flat, it's hard to trust." The sting of her words settled in Ethan's chest. It was a reminder that no amount of financial backing or nobility of intent could erase the scars of unmet expectations. He needed to confront the discomfort. Could he genuinely cultivate trust, or would he slip back into old habits, retreating to the slick safety of executive jargon? "Trust is earned. I want to earn it," he replied, his gaze steadying as his confidence drew upon the essence of vulnerability he'd begun to embrace. They began to brainstorm ideas together, hesitantly at first, but quickly picking up speed. As they tossed around concepts, a surge of energy passed between them, an unspoken agreement that this was the beginning of something transformative. But just as hope blossomed, an unsettling thought crept in. Could he balance their trust with his own needs? Despite strides in building solidarity, the fear of failure loomed large. As the meeting wrapped up, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose, but that nagging uncertainty lingered. Time would test his intentions, but today had placed him on a path toward authentic connection, a journey rife with potential and peril. He could start to affect change, but what awaited him deeper within those relationships? What unforeseen barriers could emerge, and would he possess the strength to navigate them? The cafe door swung shut behind him as he stepped into the street, uncertainty churning in his gut. Today was a step towards clarity, but tomorrow could unveil hidden challenges. The future loomed ahead, promising both heartache and hope. The sound of buzzing traffic blended with a quiet internal monologue as Ethan walked away from the cafe, the weight of the conversation still echoing in his mind. Each step felt heavy yet purposeful, bearing the dual burden of hope and fear. Would his foundations be strong enough to hold none but his own expectations? As his mind replayed Sarah's questioning gaze, a spark of determination ignited at the core of him. He would not let doubt dictate his trajectory. He needed to articulate his vision better, share with them how he planned on bringing their shared ideas to life in a manner that was not just another fleeting promise. That, and he would have to learn about their lives outside the confines of their struggles, to truly know who they were. His thoughts were interrupted as he reached his apartment and the comfort of familiarity enveloped him. Leaning against the counter, he pulled out a notebook, an obsessive pastime from his corporate days. He flipped through its filled pages, but this time, they wouldn't be packed with market strategies or quarterly forecasts. He began scribbling ideas for a series of workshops, focusing on personal storytelling as a means of empowerment. But as he wrote, his pulse quickened, and the specter of fear clawed at him once more. What if his workshops didn't resonate? What if they were poorly attended or, worse, unwelcomed? This venture required not just planning but a creative soul that he hadn't had to tap into in years. The pressure was mounting, and he could feel the weight of Sarah's skepticism. It felt like a shadow looming over him. Determined to ensure this didn't flatten his sails, Ethan reached for his phone and shot Sarah a text. "Can we discuss workshop ideas further? I want to hear more about your vision." As he sent the message, he felt his heart racing. Each of those words felt like an open invitation to engage, explore, and connect. More than that, it meant being vulnerable enough to lay bare his own ideas to someone who might still doubt him. The reply came quickly. "Yes. A brainstorm session would help. Can Mia join too?" "Of course, let us schedule something." He replied enthusiastically, surprised to find a smile creeping onto his face. The act of asking for their input signified a small, yet monumental step toward collaboration rather than a unilateral decision. Later that evening, the anticipation surged within him as he prepared for their next meeting. Facing the possibilities of partnership was exhilarating and terrifying. He realized that while he was there to assist them, he was learning just as much from their resilience. A quiet resolve settled in, transforming the anxiety into a fervor to engage deeply with their stories. As he reached for his coffee, he caught sight of himself in the reflection of the kitchen window. It was strange, he hardly recognized that man anymore, the driven executive who once placed emphasis on success defined by numbers. Here was a man craving connection, influence cultivated through shared humanity rather than sheer metrics. He was relinquishing control and allowing unpredictability to flourish, but at what personal cost? The hours trickled away, and soon it was time to rest. Yet, as Ethan settled into bed, sleep refused to take him. His mind danced between empathy and doubt, wondering if he possessed enough stamina to endure what lay ahead. The specter of chaos loomed, conjuring fears of failing those who had entrusted their stories to him. Then, a sudden realization struck him like a lightning bolt: this journey wasn't merely about him helping them. It was about cultivating a symbiotic exchange. Their struggles could tear him down or uplift him, reshaping his narrative as much as he endeavored to help reshape theirs. As sleep finally pulled at his eyelids, he grappled with one final question that slipped into his consciousness: how would he confront the complexities of their stories in a way that was meaningful to them while navigating his own changing identity? The answer seemed tantalizingly close but ultimately eluded him, leaving a sense of breathless anticipation for what the next interaction would unveil. And just like that, a new challenge flickered in his mind. Sarah's skepticism echoed louder than ever. What if they turned away from his ideas, spurning the possibilities he saw? Would he be strong enough to stand firm, even in the face of rejection? Ethan stirred awake with a newfound clarity as the sun streamed through his window, illuminating the path ahead with warmth and possibility. Yesterday's meeting with Sarah and Mia had opened a door within him, one that shifted his understanding of his role in the community from a passive observer to an engaged participant. Today was a pivotal moment in his journey, and he felt a stirring excitement mingle with the lingering doubts. He had taken a leap by inviting their input, but the true test lay before him, to turn that input into action. As he stood in front of the mirror, he acknowledged the reflection of a man who was evolving, a man with an identity intertwined with purpose beyond mere wealth. Stepping into the office, Ethan laid out a plan for the upcoming workshop series, meticulously drafting elements that would spotlight the narratives of the families he aimed to help. He envisioned creating a safe space, where their stories could breathe, and where vulnerabilities could be shared without fear of judgment. This was more than just financial support. It was about empowering voices that had long gone unheard. His phone buzzed. A message from Sarah confirmed their brainstorming session for later that day. The anticipation sent a thrill down his spine. He prepared his notes, not just with ideas but also with questions that would guide their dialogue toward collaborative venture. Each point was a stepping stone, designed to bridge his world with theirs. Throughout the morning, every thought was tethered to the vibrant energy building around this initiative. The winds of change were evident, yet they carried with them uncertainties. What if the ideas seemed flimsy? What if the community resisted yet another outsider? These thoughts rattled within, yet he pushed them aside, focusing on the magnitude of what could be, a dynamic transformation fueled by authenticity and openness. When Sarah and Mia arrived, the atmosphere was charged with possibility. They greeted him with tentative smiles, a shared understanding of the weight upon their shoulders, unspoken yet palpable. "I've been thinking about how we can build momentum," Ethan began, laying out his concept for the workshops. "Each session can focus on a unique aspect of your lives, elements that form the fabric of the community." Mia chimed in, enthusiasm bubbling over. "We can share stories about what we've been through. Maybe it will inspire other people, too." Encouraged by her excited spirit, Ethan felt a spark ignite within him, a burgeoning confidence that would propel this initiative forward. Sarah's initial skepticism started to transform. As they kicked around ideas, her arms crossed, then gradually unfolded, revealing a willingness to explore this venture together. An alliance formed around the table, a mixed sense of purpose and urgency intertwined through each suggestion, each story that was shared. They discussed local influences, people who could support their cause, community figures who could uplift their message. Ethan listened closely, asking questions to deepen their exchange, drawing out tales of resilience, threading common struggles into a coherent narrative that could power their workshops. The room filled with laughter, relatable anecdotes, and shared determination. It was a true collaboration. In this, he realized he was no longer merely a financier dabbling in charity but a co-creator of change. As the session drew to a close, Ethan felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The fear of inadequacy that had plagued him began to dissolve beneath the weight of newfound partnerships. They set a timeline, outlining goals and tasks, committing themselves to upcoming meetings that would solidify their impact. When they finally parted ways, Ethan felt a sense of solidity within himself that had been absent for years. It was no longer about proving himself, it was about expanding a vision that transcended the individual. It was rooted in the collective strength of shared narratives. Weeks passed, charmed by the rhythm of organized workshops. With each gathering, the bonds deepened, and the community began to emerge not as disparate voices, but as a chorus of shared struggles and triumphs. The stories of empowerment became transformative, weaving through Ethan's understanding of his own journey. As the final workshop neared, attended by numerous families, Ethan prepared himself to deliver an opening speech. He resisted the urge to merely present statistics. He knew now that connecting through vulnerability was where true empowerment lay. On that day, as he stood before those eager faces, Ethan felt reborn. He had not only conquered the risk of failure but embraced a greater identity forged in sympathy and empathy. "This isn't about me," he began, "it's about all of us. It's about our stories shaping the future of our community." The applause that followed not only validated his efforts but solidified him as a catalyst of change. He had earned their trust through shared endeavor rather than privilege. Ethan Reynolds had metamorphosed into a compassionate leader, not merely by wielding financial power but through authentic engagement. The emotional weight that once felt suffocating now lifted, replaced by the solid confidence of a man who had transformed pain into purpose. His legacy, once tied to wealth, had repaired itself, now intertwined with hope, connection, and genuine change. The journey had forged him into someone resilient, a man committed not just to improving lives but inspiring transformation within himself. His next call awaited, as the community blossomed into something beautiful, proving that true humanity thrived only when interconnected through shared experiences. And with this realization, he knew he had arrived at not just an achievement, but complete fulfillment in the truest sense. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. This is the moment to show your support for what we create together. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and spread the word. Comment your reactions and theories about this ending. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion.